The hammer fell with a crack that echoed through Cordelia's chest like a gunshot. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $47. $47. That's what 16 years of her life was worth to the auctioneer's gavel. She stood on the courthouse steps, her worn calico dress barely covering her trembling knees, as the crowd of men leered and whispered among themselves. The autumn wind of 1887 bit through the thin fabric, but nothing compared to the ice in her veins as she searched for her buyer. The voice was deeper than she expected, rougher around the edges, but not unkind. She turned to see a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds pushing through the crowd toward her. His hat sat low over dark hair, and his clothes spoke of honest work rather than wealth.
Kestrel Hawthorne, he
said, extending a calloused hand. I reckon you're coming with me. Cordelia stared at his outstretched palm. In her experience, men who bought girls at auction didn't offer handshakes. They grabbed what they'd paid for. But something in his steady gaze made her place her small hand in his. Cordelia Finch, she whispered. Surprised her voice worked at all. The crowd had begun to disperse, but she caught the scandalized whispers. That's Hawthorne buying himself a wife. Paying good money for damaged goods, ... His father's rolling in his grave, ... Kestrel's jaw tightened, but he kept his grip gentle on her hand. Come on, we're done here. He led her to a weathered wagon hitched to two sturdy horses. As he helped her up to the seat, their eyes met, and she saw something unexpected. Fury. But not at her. At them. At the whole damned system that put a girl on an auction block like a prize heifer. Where are you taking me? She asked, as he climbed up beside her. My ranch? About an hour's ride. He clicked his tongue to the horses. You hungry? The question caught her off guard. When was the last time someone had asked what she needed? Yes. He reached behind the seat and pulled out a cloth bundle. Inside were thick slices of bread, cheese, and dried apples. Real food, not the scraps she'd grown accustomed to, as they left the dusty streets of Millbrook behind. Cordelia risked a glance. At her buyer, Kestrel sat easy in the seat, his large hands competent on the reins. He didn't try to fill the silence with empty promises or crude suggestions. He just drove, letting her eat in peace while the countryside rolled past. Why? She finally asked. Why, what? Why did you? ... She gestured helplessly. $47 is a lot of money. Kestrel was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because nobody should be sold like cattle, because Sheriff Briggs was bidding too, and I know what kind of man he is. A shiver ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the wind. She'd heard the stories about Sheriff Briggs and the girls who disappeared into his custody. What do you expect from me? She asked, surprised by her own boldness. Kestrel turned to look at her then, and she saw something that made her breath catch. Respect. I expect you to heal, he said simply. Everything else we'll figure out as we go. The Hawthorne Ranch sprawled across a valley like a painting, with golden grasslands stretching toward purple mountains. But Cordelia barely noticed the beauty. Her attention was fixed on the modest farmhouse ahead, and the woman standing on the porch with her arms crossed. That'll be Vera, Kestrel said, following her gaze. My housekeeper. She's got opinions about most everything, and she's not shy about sharing them. Vera was a solid woman with silver-streaked hair and the kind of stern expression that could wither weeds. As Kestrel helped Cordelia down from the wagon, Vera's sharp eyes took in every detail. The auction tag still pinned to Cordelia's dress. The hollow look in her young face, the way she instinctively shrank from Kestrel's touch. Well, Vera said, her voice crisp as autumn air, I suppose introductions are in order. Vera, this is Cordelia Finch. Cordelia, this is Vera Morrison. She keeps this place from falling down around my ears. Vera's expression softened marginally. Girl looks half-starved. When's the last time you had a proper meal, child? Cordelia faltered. She couldn't remember. That's what I thought. Come on then. Vera turned toward the house. Kestrel, you see to the horses. I'll see to the girl. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of baking bread. Vera bustled around, heating soup and slicing ham while Cordelia sat at the scrubbed wooden table, still hardly believing this was real. You don't have to be afraid of him, Vera said, without preamble, as she set a steaming bowl before Cordelia. Kestrel's got his faults, stubborn as a mule and twice as ornery when crossed, but he's a good man. His father, God rest his soul, raised him right. Cordelia took a spoonful of soup, savoring the rich flavor. What happened to his father? Died 3 years back. Heart gave out during a hard winter. Left Kestrel to run this place alone, and he's been doing a fine job of it, despite what the gossips in town say. What do they say? Vera's mouth pressed into a thin line. That he's peculiar, that a man his age should have taken a wife by now. They don't understand that Kestrel marches to his own drum. She paused, studying Cordelia's face. What they're going to say about today. Well, that's going to be considerably worse. Before Cordelia could ask what she meant, the kitchen door opened and Kestrel entered, hat in hand. He'd washed up at the pump, she realized, noting his damp hair and clean hands. Everything settled? Vera asked. Horses are fed and watered. Kestrel's eyes found Cordelia's. How are you feeling? It was such a simple question, but tears sprang to her eyes. When was the last time anyone had cared how she felt? Better, thank you. Good. Pulled out a chair and sat across from her. I figure we should talk about expectations, yours and mine. Cordelia set down her spoon, her stomach clenching. Here it comes, she thought. The demands, the conditions. I don't expect anything from you that you're not willing to give, Kestrel said quietly. You can stay here as long as you need. I'll fare with the house if you want or not. Learn to ride if that interests you. There's a spare room upstairs that's yours, and if I want to leave, then you leave. I'll give you money for the stage, and wish you well. Cordelia stared at him. I don't understand. If you don't want, if you're not expecting me to. She couldn't finish the sentence. Kestrel's jaw tightened. I bought you to get you away from that auction block. What happens? Next is up to you. But people will talk. They already are. Let 'em. His storm gray eyes flashed. I've never lived my life according to what others think, and I'm not about to start now. Vera nodded approvingly.
I'll do.
He was stubborn. For the first time in months, Cordelia felt something that might have been hope stirring in her chest. 3 weeks passed like a dream Cordelia was afraid to wake from. She helped Vera with cooking and cleaning, finding peace in simple tasks that belonged only to her. Kestrel kept his distance, polite but not intrusive, letting her find her footing in this strange new world where no one demanded anything from her, its body or soul. But the outside world wouldn't leave them alone. They're calling it an abomination, Vera announced, slamming the kitchen door behind her as she returned from town with supplies. Preacher Grimwald gave a whole sermon about moral decay and the sanctity of proper courtship. Cordelia looked up from the bread dough she was kneading. What else are they saying? That Kestrel's lost his mind? That he's harboring a fallen woman? That decent folks shouldn't associate with either of you? Vera's voice was grim. Mrs. Fletcher actually crossed the street to avoid speaking to me. The bread dough blurred as tears filled Cordelia's eyes. She'd known this peace couldn't last. Maybe I should leave. I'm ruining his reputation. Child, Kestrel knew exactly what he was doing when he bid on you. And his reputation was already questionable in their small minds. Vera covered Cordelia's flour-dusted hands with her own. The question is, what do you want? What did she want? The question had seemed impossible just weeks ago, but now. Want to stay? She whispered. Is that selfish? It's human. The kitchen door opened again, and Kestrel entered, his expression thunderous. Vera told you about the talk in town. Cordelia nodded, unable to meet his eyes. Look at me. His voice was gentle but firm. When she raised her head, she saw no regret in his face, only determination. I want you to understand something. I don't give a damn what they think, but I do care what this is doing to you. I'm fine. No, you're not. You've been jumping at shadows all morning. He pulled out a chair and sat beside her. Talk to me, Cordelia. What are you thinking? The kindness in his voice broke something loose inside her. I'm thinking that I've brought scandal to a good man. I'm thinking that maybe they're right. Maybe I am damaged goods that should have stayed on that auction block. Kestrel's hand slammed down on the table, making both women jump. Don't you ever say that about yourself. It's true, isn't it? I was sold like cattle, because my uncle couldn't pay his debts, because I had nowhere else to go and no one else to stop. Kestrel's voice was raw. You want to know the truth? The scandal isn't that I bought you. Scandal is that we live in a world where human beings can be sold at all. The scandal is that Sheriff Briggs was bidding on you like you were a prize pig, and every man in that crowd thought it was acceptable. Cordelia stared at him, seeing the fury burning in his storm-gray eyes. But beneath the anger was something else. Something that made her heart race. I've been thinking too, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. Thinking that for the first time in my life, this house feels like a home. Thinking that I look forward to every sunrise because it means another day of watching you discover who you are when no one's trying to break you. Kestrel, I'm falling in love with you, he said simply. I know that's probably the last thing you want to hear. I know you need time and space, and I'm falling in love with you too, she interrupted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. The silence that followed was charged like the air before a thunderstorm. Vera quietly slipped out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. That's impossible, Kestrel said finally. You can't know what you feel. Not yet. Don't tell me what I can and can't feel. Cordelia's voice was stronger than she'd ever heard it. I may have been sold at auction, but my heart is still my own. He reached across the space between them, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. Cordelia, I love the way you look at me like I'm worth something. I love that you ask what I want instead of just taking what you need. I love that you get angry at the world for what it did to me instead of being angry at me for letting it happen. A tear slipped down his weathered cheek. What are we going to do? We're going to love each other, she said, covering his hand with hers, and let the rest of the world go to hell. The first stone shattered the kitchen window at dawn, sending glass cascading across the breakfast table. Cordelia screamed and dove behind the counter as Kestrel lunged for his rifle. Stay down, he commanded, moving to the broken window. Outside, a crowd of men stood in the yard, their faces twisted with righteous fury. Sheriff Briggs stood at their front, a badge on his chest and malice in his eyes. Hawthorne, Briggs called out. Send the whore out and we'll make this easy on you. Kestrel's knuckles went white around the rifle stock. Get off my land, Briggs. Can't do that. We've got a complaint from concerned citizens about moral corruption. That girl needs to be removed from decent society. She's not going anywhere. More stones flew, striking the side of the house. Vera appeared from upstairs, her own shotgun in hand. They've been gathering since before sunrise, she reported grimly. Looks like half the town's out there. Cordelia crawled to where Kestrel crouched by the window. This is my fault. I should go with them. End this before someone gets hurt. Like hell. Kestrel's voice was steel. You're not property, Cordelia. Not theirs, not mine, not anyone's. But if I know. He turned to face her, and she saw something fierce and protective blazing in his eyes. We make our stand here together. New voice joined the commotion outside, Preacher Grimwald's sanctimonious tones rising above the crowd. The Lord commands us to cleanse our community of sin. This unholy union must be dissolved. Unholy union? Vera snorted. They're not even married. Kestrel's jaw tightened. Maybe we should be. The words hung in the air like smoke. Cordelia stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did you say? Marry me? He set down the rifle and took her hands. Right here? Right now. If you'll have me. Kestrel, you can't be serious. This isn't how proposals are supposed to happen. Nothing about us has been conventional. His thumb traced across her knuckles. I love you, Cordelia Finch. I want to. Build a life with you. Have children with you. Grow old beside you. Will you marry me? Another volley of stones struck the house. Through the broken window, they could hear Briggs organizing his men. Smoke them out if you have to. The girl's coming with us. They won't stop, Cordelia whispered. Even if we marry, they'll find another excuse. Then we'll face whatever comes. But we'll face it as husband and wife. Vera cleared her throat. I hate to interrupt this romantic moment, but Preacher Grimwald's out there. If you're serious about this, now might be the time. Kestrel's eyes never left Cordelia's face. What do you say? She thought about the girl who'd stood on the auction block just weeks ago, hollow-eyed and hopeless. That girl was gone. place stood a woman who'd rediscovered her own worth through the eyes of a man who saw her as precious. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Kestrel's smile could have lit up the valley. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and full of promise, while the mob raged outside and Vera muttered about the timing of young fools in love. "Grimwald," Kestrel called out the window. "You want to see Christian duty done? Get in here and perform a wedding?" The crowd fell silent. Then Briggs laughed, ugly and mocking. "You think marrying your whore legitimizes this?" "I think," Kestrel replied, his voice carrying across the yard, "that you're afraid to see what real love looks like. Afraid because it shows up everything. That's small and bitter in your own hearts." "We're not coming in there," Grimwald called back. "Come out and face judgment like a man. Then I guess you'll have to explain to your congregation why you refused to perform a Christian marriage when asked." Kestrel's tone was mild, but Cordelia could see the calculation in his eyes. There was murmuring in the crowd. Grimwald was trapped by his own rhetoric about Christian duty. If he refused to marry them, he'd look like a hypocrite. If he agreed, he'd legitimize their union in the eyes of the community. Finally, reluctantly, Grimwald approached the house. "I'll come in, but this changes nothing. Sin sanctified is still a sin." "Just marry us, preacher," Kestrel said. "God can sort out the rest." Preacher Grimwald stood in the center of the kitchen like a man attending his own execution, his prayer, book clutched in white-knuckled hands. Behind him, Sheriff Briggs and two of his deputies crowded through the doorway, their eyes cataloging everything as if they were already planning an arrest. "This is highly irregular," Grimwald muttered, glancing nervously at the broken window where more faces pressed against the frame. "A wedding should be a joyous occasion, witnessed by family and friends in the Lord's house." "It seems to me we've got plenty of witnesses," Vera observed dryly, gesturing toward the crowd outside. "And I reckon God's present whether we're in his house or he's in ours." Cordelia stood beside Kestrel, still wearing her simple work dress, her hair hastily pinned up. She'd imagined her wedding day differently: a white dress, flowers, a proper church filled with loved ones. Instead, she had broken glass at her feet and hatred pressed against the windows. But when she looked at Kestrel, none of that mattered. He'd changed into his best shirt, the one he wore to town on Sundays. And his hair was still damp from where he'd quickly combed it. He looked at her like she was the most beautiful bride who'd ever walked down an aisle. "Do you have rings?" Grimwald asked impatiently. Kestrel shook his head. "No, we hear." Vera stepped forward, pulling a simple gold band from her finger. "This was my mother's, and this, ... She tugged a signet ring from a chain around her neck. "This was Kestrel's father's. I've been keeping it safe." Kestrel's voice was rough. "Vera, you don't have to hush. Your PA would want his ring to go to your bride. My mother would be pleased to know her ring was part of a love story." Cordelia's eyes filled with tears. Through all of this, Vera had stood by them, solid as a mountain. "Well then," Grimwald said reluctantly, "let us proceed." "Dearly beloved, skip the ceremony," Briggs interrupted. "Just get to the vows and be done with it." Kestrel's jaw tightened. "My bride deserves proper words." "Your bride," Briggs sneered, "is a piece of merchandise you bought at auction. This whole charade is enough." The voice that cut through the tension wasn't Kestrel's or even Grimwald's. It was Cordelia's, clear and strong and carrying the authority of a woman who'd found her voice. "I am not merchandise. I am not a whore. I am not damaged goods. I am a woman who has survived more than any of you could endure, and I am choosing to marry the finest man I've ever known." The room fell silent. Even the crowd outside seemed to pause, straining to hear. "I have been sold, yes. I have been treated as less than human, but I am still here. I am still standing. And I am still capable of love." She turned to face Kestrel, her voice softening. "Choose you, Kestrel Hawthorne. It's because I have no other options, but because you are the choice my heart makes freely." Kestrel reached for her hands, his own trembling slightly. "I choose you too, Cordelia Finch. Not to save you, not to scandalize them, but because loving you has made me a better man than I ever thought I could be." Grimwald cleared his throat, visibly moved despite himself. Very well, Kestrel Hawthorne. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? I do. And do you, Cordelia Finch, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? Cordelia's voice was clear as church bells. I do. The rings. Era handed them over. Kestrel slipped his father's ring onto Cordelia's finger, and she placed Vera's mother's ring on his. The gold was warm from Vera's skin, carrying the blessing of generations. By the power vested in me, by the territory of Colorado and Almighty God, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Grimwald's voice was resigned but official. You may kiss your bride. Kestrel cupped Cordelia's face in his calloused hands and kissed her as tenderly as if they were alone in a cathedral, instead of surrounded by enemies in a kitchen with broken windows. When they broke apart, there were tears on both their faces. There, Kestrel said, turning to face Briggs in the crowd. Tay, we're married, legal and proper. Now get off my land. But Briggs wasn't finished. Marriage don't change what she is. Still a whore, just a married one now. That's when Kestrel's control finally snapped. Kestrel's fist connected with Briggs' jaw with a crack that echoed through the kitchen like gunfire. The sheriff staggered backward, blood flowing from his split lip, before crashing into one of his deputies. Kestrel. No. Cordelia reached for her husband's arm, but he was already advancing on the fallen sheriff. Say that word about my wife again, Kestrel growled, hauling Briggs up by his shirt front. I dare you. The kitchen erupted into chaos. Briggs' deputies reached for their weapons, but Vera's shotgun swung toward them with practiced ease. Wooden boys, sold guns got a hair trigger, and my patience is wearing thin. Outside, the crowd surged forward, pressing against the broken window and doorframe. Angry voices called for justice, for punishment, for blood.
Oh.
You just assaulted a lawman. Briggs snarled, wiping blood from his mouth. That's a hanging offense. Self-defense, Vera said coolly. You were threatening his wife with vile language. Any jury in the territory would understand. What jury? Briggs laughed bitterly. You think anyone's going to side with a man who married a whore over a sheriff doing his duty? Kestrel's hands tightened on Briggs' shirt, and for a moment Cordelia feared he might kill the man. Then Preacher Grimwald stepped between them. Enough. The preacher's voice boomed with surprising authority. This has gone far enough. Sheriff. Briggs, you've witnessed a legal marriage performed in accordance with territorial law. Your business here is finished. Grimwald's eyes were cold. I may have my doubts about this union, but it is sanctified before God and man. If you continue to harass this couple, you'll answer to the church as well as the law. Briggs straightened his shirt, his face mottled with rage. This isn't over, Hawthorne. Not by a long shot. Yes, it is. The new voice came from the doorway, where a tall man in a traveled dusty suit stood surveying the scene. He was older than Kestrel, with silver threading his dark hair, and the kind of quiet authority that commanded attention. Judge Morrison, Grimwald said, with obvious relief. I didn't know you were in town. Just arrived on the morning stage. Judge Morrison's stern gaze swept the room, taking in the broken glass, the shotgun in Vera's hands, and the blood on Briggs' face. What seems to be the problem here, Sheriff? Briggs straightened, assuming his official bearing. Disturbing the peace, Your Honor. This man has been harboring a woman of ill repute, and now he's assaulted an officer of the law. I see. Judge Morrison's tone was neutral. And you, Mr. Hawthorne? What's your side of this? Kestrel kept his arm around Cordelia's waist, protective and possessive. I married the woman I love, and this man insulted her with language unfit for decent company. I defended my wife's honor. The judge's eyes fell on Cordelia, and she saw no condemnation there, only careful assessment. Mrs. Hawthorne, is it? You have something to say about all this? Cordelia felt every eye in the room focus on her. The old Cordelia would have shrunk back, made herself small and invisible. But that girl was gone. I was sold at auction 3 weeks ago because my uncle couldn't pay his debts, she said clearly. Kestrel bought me not to own me, but to free me. He gave me a choice about my own life for the first time since I was orphaned. I chose to stay. I chose to love him. Today I chose to marry him. And yet the town seems to have strong opinions about your choices. The town, Cordelia said with dignity, has never asked what I wanted. They've only assumed they knew what I was. Judge Morrison nodded slowly. Sheriff Briggs, I'm curious about something. Did you bid at this auction? Briggs' face went red. That's irrelevant, answer the question. Yes, but that was different. I was looking for a housekeeper. At $46, the judge's eyebrows rose. That's rather expensive for housekeeping services. The crowd outside had gone quiet, straining to hear this exchange. Briggs realized he'd been trapped by his own words. The point is, Briggs said desperately, decent folks don't want this kind of moral corruption in their community. What I see, Judge Morrison replied coldly, is a legal marriage between consenting adults being harassed by a mob. Sheriff, disperse this crowd immediately. If I hear of any further harassment of the Hawthorns, I'll be asking some very pointed questions about your conduct. Briggs opened his mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. With obvious reluctance, he gestured to his deputies and headed for the door as the crowd began to break up. Judge Morrison approached Kestrel and Cordelia. You'll have enemies, he warned quietly. Some folks don't like having their prejudices challenged. We know, Kestrel replied. We'll face whatever comes. The judge smiled slightly. I believe you will. Congratulations on your marriage. It bring you both happiness. As the last of the crowd dispersed, Cordelia sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. It was done. They were married, and for now at least, they were safe. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. 6 months later, Cordelia stood in the doorway of the little schoolhouse she'd helped build, watching as the last of her students gathered their books and headed home. The spring of 1888 had brought unexpected changes to the valley, and her small school was one of them. Mrs. Hawthorne. Little Molly Fletcher tugged at her skirt. Will you tell us more about the butterflies tomorrow? Cordelia smiled down at the 8-year-old, still marveling at how naturally the children had accepted her. Unlike their parents, they didn't care about her past, only that she made learning interesting and always had time for their questions. Of course, sweetheart, we'll talk about their migration patterns. As Molly skipped away, Cordelia felt strong arms encircle her waist from behind. She leaned back against Kestrel's solid chest, breathing in the familiar scent of leather and sunshine that always clung to him. How was your day, Teacher Hawthorne? He murmured against her ear. Wonderful. Jimmy Peterson finally mastered his multiplication tables. And little Sarah Connolly wrote the most beautiful poem about her grandmother. She turned in his arms, studying his face. You look pleased with yourself. What happened? Kestrel's grin was boyish. Judge Morrison stopped by the ranch today. Had some interesting news from the territorial capital? Oh, seems Sheriff Briggs has been recalled. Investigation into his conduct turned up some irregularities in how he handled evidence and testimony, particularly regarding cases involving young women. Cordelia's heart skipped. They believed the complaints? More than believed them. 3 other women came forward after our story got out. Briggs is facing criminal charges. The relief was so overwhelming that Cordelia's knees went weak. Kestrel caught her, holding her steady as she processed the news. It's really over, she whispered. The legal part, anyway. The gossip, double quotes. He shrugged. Some folks still cross the street when they see us coming, but others, He gestured toward the schoolhouse. Others sent their children to learn from my wife. It was true. Slowly, gradually, some members of the community had begun to see past the scandal to the woman beneath. Cordelia's patience with difficult children and her gift for teaching had won over parents, who'd initially been horrified by her presence. There's something else, Kestrel said, his voice turning serious. Vera's been acting mysterious all week, humming and smiling like she's got a secret. As if summoned by her name, Vera appeared around the corner of the schoolhouse, practically bouncing on her toes. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you too. What's got you so excited? Cordelia asked. This, Vera thrust a letter into her hands. It came this morning. Cordelia unfolded the paper, her eyes widening as she read. Kestrel, look at this. Her husband read over her shoulder, his own expression growing amazed. The letter was from a lawyer in Denver, informing Cordelia that her great-aunt Millicent, a woman she'd never met, had died and left her a substantial inheritance. Apparently, Millicent had been following Cordelia's story through newspaper. Accounts and had been impressed by her determination to build a new life. $20,000, Cordelia breathed. And property in Denver. The letter says she was a teacher, too, Vera added excitedly. Started a school for girls who had nowhere else to go. The lawyer wants to know if you'd be interested in continuing her work. Cordelia looked up at Kestrel, seeing her own excitement reflected in his storm-gray eyes. We could expand what we're doing here, help more children, maybe take in girls who need a safe place. We could build something real, he agreed. Something lasting. A year ago, Cordelia had stood on an auction block believing her life was over. Now she stood in the doorway of her own school, surrounded by love and possibility, holding a letter. That would let her help others the way Kestrel had helped her. So what do you think? Vera asked impatiently. Are you going to Denver? Cordelia looked at her husband, the man who'd seen worth in a girl everyone else had discarded. What do you think? Ready for another scandal? Kestrel threw back his head and laughed, the sound rich and free. Sweetheart. Scandals seem to follow us anyway. Might as well make them count for something. Swept her into his arms and spun her. Around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, she was breathless and dizzy and completely, utterly happy. Besides, he said, growing serious as he cupped her face in his hands, wherever you go, I go. That's what the vows meant. Even if it means leaving the ranch. The ranch is just land, my home. As the sun set over the valley, painting. The sky in shades of golden rose, Cordelia kissed her husband and thought about second chances. About love that transforms scandal into strength, shame into purpose. The girl who'd been sold at auction was gone forever. In her place stood a woman who knew her own worth, surrounded by people who loved her not despite her past, but because of how she'd risen above it. And this was only the beginning. 3 months later, the Hawthorne School for Girls opened its doors. In Denver, with Cordelia as headmistress and Kestrel as ranch manager for the property, their first student was a 15-year-old named Ruth, who'd been rescued from circumstances not unlike Cordelia's own, as Cordelia watched the girl take her. First tentative steps into the bright classroom, she felt Kestrel's hand slip into hers. The scandal that had once threatened to destroy them had become the foundation of something beautiful, a place where broken girls could discover they weren't broken at all, just bent by circumstances beyond their control. Ready for the next adventure, Mrs. Hawthorne? Kestrel whispered. Cordelia squeezed his hand, her wedding ring, Vera's mother's ring, catching the morning light. With you, I'm ready for anything. Outside, Denver bustled with progress and possibility. Inside the Hawthorne School, a new generation of young women would learn that their worth wasn't determined by their circumstances, but by their courage. To rise above them, the rancher and the girl from the auction had become so much more than the scandal that brought them together. They'd become hope itself, proving that love could indeed conquer all, even a world determined to tear it apart. And in the years to come, as dozens of girls passed through their doors and went on to become teachers, nurses, business owners, and mothers who raised strong daughters of their own, Cordelia and Kestrel's love story would be remembered not as a scandal, but as a testament to the transformative power of seeing worth where others saw only shame. There, love had saved not just each other, but countless others who needed to believe that second chances were possible, that dignity could be reclaimed, and that sometimes the greatest scandals of all are the ones that dare to choose love over judgment.